It's so nice to see you.
It's great to see you, my friend.
Oh, wow. It has been so long. Last time I saw Dr. Garner was at the ACDA National Conference in Dallas, probably like 8 years ago or something
Yeah,
like that. It's been a while.
long
But
time.
yeah, Dr. Garner and I went way back when I moved here to Louisiana, and he was the director of choral activities at Southeast Louisiana University when I went, and he was my inspiration to be a choral conductor. So thank you, him, and Dr. Garner for that, because yeah, it truly an inspiration. He took me under his wings, and boy, has been. I still miss those classes with you.
Me too.
so so this is the Huntsville Master Chorale, and it's a community choir, and we've been in existence for almost 22 years, or they're being in existence. I've been with them for like 8 years, 6 years, something like that. And it's a great group. Just to tell everybody about Dr. Garner, he is the director of choral activities at Baldwin Wallace Conservatory, and he taught also at Oklahoma State University, where he conducted the concert chorale and other choirs. He worked with Westminster choir on the summers in Italy, and mainly doing research. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So that was a program that continued. We stopped going to Italy ultimately. We spent 4 summers in Italy, and then it got so expensive, y'all, that we moved it back to the Westminster campus of Westminster Choir College. And the festival is really the festival that Robert Shaw started, that he did every summer for 30 years on Westminster's campus, both when it was in Dayton and then when it moved to the current location in Princeton. Well, not current anymore, actually, but when it moved to Princeton. So it was really continuing that tradition. And I went and taught conducting and sang, and was the principal researcher for that organization. I prepared their scores from manuscript and all of that. And I miss it so much. So fun. It was really a good time.
Yeah, I bet, especially right now with Italy not being, close. Several of us went to Italy last year, and boy, we enjoy it, but we had a heat wave in there that kind of like say, we're not gonna go back. Yes.
So this group was in Italy?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I always worked with the choir book. Every year I worked with the choir book at Santa Maria del Fiore.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So I would go 2 weeks early and work with that manuscript and try to create modern editions out of that.
So tell us about a little bit of your experience working with community choirs. I know in the times of Southeastern, you work with a chorale in there, which was a community choirs. Have you worked also in another choirs?
Yeah, so, really until I came to Cleveland, I've always had community groups or church groups everywhere. So for 27 years, well, not really. For 20 years, I was always doing community groups and church groups and all that. I think what you are doing and community music making is so much more important than anything I'm ever doing as a professional musician or as a professor. I mean, that's what this is all about. It's really why COVID is particularly awful on groups like yours. I think it's amazing. I mean, that's why we do this. We do this to be together. We do this to have a reason to come together, and to make something beautiful. And we can't do that.
Yeah, during this time of COVID, obviously all the community choirs and church and everything have kind of shut down. But have been so many research of, just to continue. What things are you doing, or want to do in order to continue doing this? And what is your approach during this time?
So we've been through over the summer, we went through 3 different versions of what opening our university was going to look like. And I'm sure so many of you were in the same boat, right? So just 9 days ago, the whole vocal program here, and that's some 200 and some singers, was all put online. So they wanted no public singing, especially no group singing. Voice lessons are moved to crazy places, great big huge rooms, and they moved the choral program completely online and the opera program completely online. So our solution, what I frantically put together is I teach, everybody in my groups are voice majors, and whether that's music education or vocal performance or music theater even, some piano majors and all of that. But these are all people training to be professional musicians, they think. So I'm bringing in 9 different guest speakers, kind of like I'm doing right now. These are professional conductors and professional singers, choral singers that are out in the world doing this. And they're going to talk about how they made their path and what they're doing with their lives, and the difficulties of their lives. And the conductors will talk about what they look for in a singer and what they expect from their singers and their musicians. And then musically, we'll do, I call it Brady Bunch Choir. We'll do some Brady Bunch Choir, some virtual choir things for the university, so they can put it up on the website and all that. And then we do a big Christmas program here, and that will all be virtual this year. So we'll do a big virtual program for that, spread over all the groups, but we'll each do a little bit. And then on top of that, with my top choirs that do the Bach Festival, we'll learn, I'm going to put them through a styles program, Patricia. So we'll start we'll start with Renaissance music, and I'll take them through stylistic, how to sing each genre of music stylistically, and give them little assignments on that then I have to listen to. It's a lot harder on me. The whole setup is a lot harder on the teachers, as I'm sure so many of you are experiencing. And then they'll start, when we do the Baroque chapter of that, they'll start working on the music for we do Christmas oratorio next semester in April. I know it's weird, but we do Christmas oratorio, all 6 cantatas in April. So they'll get a head start on that, which actually will be nice when we get to January. Assuming we can sing it. We may not be allowed to sing it next semester either.
Yeah, I know. I remember that when you were coming and you were ready to perform the festival, and then they canceled the festival.
Yeah. Right? In 86 years, they've never canceled. Through wars, everything, never have canceled. And this shut it down. Yeah, we had Westminster here last year. Westminster was joining us, and we were doing Matthew Passion and downtown, and it was going to be so special. It was going to be really cool. But here we are.
Here we are. So what things are you thinking for, you're talking about opera singers and you're talking about choirs. How can we assess the students, even though there are, the communication and the Zoom is a little bit delayed, and sometimes the sound is not the true sound? What things we can do, and I'm talking about all the educators in here, in order to improve or to address in this kind of situation? What kind of singing we can do, or tips that you can give us in order to sing through a computer? Yeah,
so the truth is, Patricia, is that the teachers that you have in the room probably have more expertise in it than I do. They I'm sure have to work much more diligently in exactly those ways than I do. It's easier for me, I think, because they're all music majors, and I don't feel a lot of pressure to make the most amazing product and to make everything just perfect. In a very small way, it's a relief, because I can actually focus on some things that I've always wanted to teach them, and I never really have time because we always have this performance schedule that I have to keep preparing for, especially second semester with the festival. But you know, the things I assess last semester when we went remote, and that I'm going to assess this semester, are really quite basic. Are they singing the right notes and rhythms, and is their diction correct? And when I do the styles course, are they executing the stylistic traits that I just taught them? But very basic, really very, very easy. Because the human element is gone. And in terms of really hearing their voices and really hearing their production, I can't find much value in it to really work with it, to really do much about that. I think going back to basics and teaching fundamentals is really, really, and this is an excellent time to do that. And to figure out what the holes are in my curriculum that I can now fill in a way that I've never been able to before, ever. There's never time to talk about all the things I want to talk about, you know, to really talk about the history of everything that we're going to do. I'm going to have time to do that, you know, in a way that I just am not afforded during our concert seasons, you know, as we're going through it all. So that'll be delightful. But assessment, that's the problem, especially with younger students. That's just really hard. I think it's you know, verging on impossible, except for teaching the rudiments and the basics.
Yeah. In our right now in our community, especially here in our choir, for me has been something very interesting, because I have heard more individual voices when they send me the recordings, so I can assess more in detail, you know, articulation or releases and things like that. So we've been doing more recordings, and actually I think at this time I feel that we might get a better advantage, a little bit of advantage in just singing and hearing individual voices than the whole choir.
Excellent. Yeah, that's cool.
Any questions that you have for Dr. Garner, Stacy or Sarah, our educators?
I have questions for you, that's for sure.
So one of the things that I was telling them about you, that you're so special because you did your dissertation on the golden mean of Bach chorale, Bach Cantatas. So can you tell us a little bit of that, how it came about? And I think it's fascinating. So.
Yeah, so the golden mean is, I'm sorry if lots of you already know this, and if you all know it, just put your hands up, and then I can fast forward through it or something. So the golden mean is a geometric figure that's found throughout nature, and then has been used in the arts in various ways. In my study of it, I examined every movement from every cantata for just in the most basic sense for where the golden mean is in that movement. So I looked at the number of measures in the movement and multiplied that by 0.618. So the golden mean is an irrational number, like pi, goes on forever, and has lots of fascinating features. It's its own reciprocal. So for example, two pairs that are of numbers that are in this ratio, you can divide, let's take 13 and 8. You can divide 13 by 8, and it will be, 13 by 8 will be 1.61, yada, yada, yada. And if you go the other way, it'll be 0.61, yada, yada, yada. So it's the only figure in mathematics where it's its own reciprocal. Which becomes important in how it works. It's also related to the Fibonacci series. So that's the additive number series. You take any two pairs of numbers, by the way, but if you start with 0 and 1, and to derive the next number in the series, you add those two together. So 0 plus 1 is 1. 1 plus 1 is 2, and you just keep moving up the line. 1 plus 2 is 3. 2 plus 3 is 5. Where am I? 3 plus 5 is 8. 8 plus 5 is 13, etc. On and on and on. And any pairs of those numbers approximates the golden mean. And the higher up the series you go, the closer it is to being accurate. So it goes really quick. It gets accurate very, very, very fast. And by the way, you can choose any two numbers you want. You don't have to start with 0. You can choose negative 5,006 and 22 and start with those as your first two numbers and add them together. And it very quickly approaches the golden mean. Mm-hmm. And that's really cool if you're an artist. It's really cool when you're creating things. And so much of the world around us is organized this way. And once you start looking at it, it's very kind of popular right now and kind of hip right now. But when you start looking at it, you see it in architecture, and you certainly see it in art. And so I wanted to study it in music, and I wanted to do it in a way that provided enough data to make some bad assumption of Bach's conscious use of this figure, at least by how often it occurred in his music. And it was unbelievably fascinating results, but really led me to the only dissertation in history probably that ended with, I don't really know. I have no idea. The problem is, y'all, is it's flawed. And if you get interested and read other studies, realize that they didn't study any other figure. So just because I have results that are whatever, all I checked was 0.618. I didn't check 0.619. I didn't check 0.5. Well, I have actually now. I've started checking the halfway point too in Bach's music, Patricia. And I didn't check any other figures. So I can say 75% of the overtures conform to this figure, but I didn't check 0.619. Maybe it gets 80%. You know, so there's some real flaws in all of the studies, including mine. But I knew that going in, and that's why my dissertation ends with, I don't really know. He never talks about it. Johann Sebastian never talks about it. He doesn't talk about math, but there's some fascinating procedures that he employed that lead us to believe that he was thinking this way. He would line out, for example, he wrote very, very fast. He had to compose it because he was a practical musician, writing for every week for his church services. And he would line out the man, often, not all the time, but he would line out the manuscript with all of the bar lines first before he wrote any music, and he'd put a double bar at the end. So before he wrote one note, he said, this movement is going to be 122 bars long. Oh, wow. Before he ever wrote a note down. And then he would proceed to write the most complicated music, some of the most complicated music in history, exactly to that design. Well, y'all, that helps me, right? Because now he knew where the end was, which means he can get all fancy and designy about because he knows where the middle is. Right. As he's writing, he says that there's the center of the piece and there's the golden mean of the piece. And I mean, he knows all of that from the get-go. So that's a really phenomenal feature of his music. The scholar that studies that is named Robert Marshall, if you're interested in that. He's at Indiana University. And he studied the compositional process of Bach, a big 2-volume set of books. But it's really, 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 really fascinating. We know he was interested in numbers some. Sorry, you probably hear my 5-year-old screaming back there. We know he was interested in numbers some. That's probably been exaggerated in the scholarship and in the literature, but he was interested in numbers, but not necessarily mathematics. So I got interested in it because of that, and the results are pretty amazing. Like, do you want me to go on, Patricia, or do you want me to?
I remember when we were talking about a long time ago, you said that during that time that you discover either his last name or something like that, or specific notes all the time. Yeah. Am I right? Or...
That's right. So there's some conjecture that he was, and pretty strong conjecture that he was into grammatia, which is a number system in which you assign a number to each letter of the alphabet. So A is 1, B is 2, C is 3, et cetera, et cetera. And conveniently, J.S. Bach is 14. I hope I'm not wrong. I haven't done this in a long time. I'll have to figure it out. But J.S. Bach is 14, and Johann Sebastian Bach is 41. So it's palindromic. Beautiful, right? And you can, so people went through, and lots of scholars spent lots of time counting the number of notes in a fugue subject and saying, there's 14 notes in a fugue subject. Oh, there's 41 measures in this movement. See, it's so cool. And you know, he wrote so much music. I think a lot of it is just nonsense, but it's very interesting. And there's been lots and lots and lots of work done on his use of number symbolism. He did amazing things, like in that lead to us to believe that he did esoteric things like the golden mean and like number symbolism. You know, in St. Matthew Passion, he wrote all the words of Jesus in red ink. I mean, just like the Bibles that we get at the hotel room, you know, all the words of Jesus are in red. He did the same thing. But he also took, in St. Matthew Passion, whenever the word, often when the word cross is sung, the notes are shaped down, up, down. And in several cases, 3 or 4 cases in the score, and you can buy the facsimile now so you can really see what he did. So the note goes here, here, and here, and he drew a cross through them. So he was doing these symbolic gestures in his music for absolutely no reason. You don't hear it that way. It doesn't change your listening experience, but he was just being esoteric and interesting. You know, he did, there's several examples of that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So it's not that far-fetched. And, you know, my results are, they're pretty amazing. There's some real, you know, half the time I look at the work that I did and think, yeah, that's really stupid. And then the other half of the time I think, gosh, that's so cool. That's really amazing. I can't believe it's that consistent. And then I have to remind myself of all the good arguments against this.
I mean, it was fascinating when I read it. So that was a long time ago, and it was fascinating.
Well, can I just talk about one of them?
Yes.
I'll try to go quick. So the Bach wrote lots of da capo forms. So you sing all the way to the end of the piece, and I know many of you have seen this. You sing all the way to the end of the piece, and then the words da capo are there, which means go back to the beginning, go back to the head, go back to the beginning. And then you go back to the beginning and you sing up to the point where the fermata is, which is some ways through the piece. And that fermata marks the end of the work. So there in the cantatas alone, there are 200 da capo forms, da capo arias, da capo choruses. There are 200 of these da capo forms. And 25% of them, all these are accurate to 3 decimal places. 25% of them have the golden mean of the whole piece, including the repeated measures, is at bar 1. Exactly at bar 1. And if you give me 1% in either direction, that is 0.619 and down to 0.617, it's not even 1%, right? Just give me 1 digit, it's 1/100th. Then I get 50% of them right. That's crazy. And it's true if the aria is 5 minutes long, that is 500 measures, or whether it's 2 minutes long and 50 measures. It doesn't matter. And then you add to that in the da capo form, if you take just the written bars, so don't do the repeat, just the music that he wrote without the words da capo, and where do you think the golden mean is? It's the bar where the fermata is. Also, 25% of the time, and I get 50% of them if you just give me 1 digit. I get all the way up to 50%. So that makes you scratch your head. That makes you know, wait a minute, that's a little crazy. That's just a little nuts. And the best ones are when they're both right. You know, when they're both accurate. Those are my favorites. Those are the ones that really make you crazy. That really just are phenomenal. I didn't have time to check the first movement. of this amazing cantata, but it very well could be interesting.
We were just starting to work on the Cantata 79, which is the Nun danken alle Gott. Thank you, all our God. And for this time, we're probably going to do only the 2 chorales in there. So can you give us a little bit of insight of how can we perform this? What will be the approach that we need to do in order to sing these particular chorales, or any chorale?
Yeah, I haven't done this piece in maybe 10 years. But I spent some time with the score since I get to talk to you all. So this is, I have to give a little background. So I apologize if this is some repetition, but this is a Reformation. He wrote this for Reformation Sunday, which is the Sunday where they remember and celebrate Luther nailing the theses to the wall. They really celebrate the Reformation. In Bach's time, it was the most militant, I struggle to find the right word for this, but the most aggressive service that they had during the whole year. And this music reflects that. I mean, he scores it for 2 horns and timpani. And in the first movement, that timpani plays like half the piece, which is unheard of. That drum is always banging. And the horn parts are, by the way, are excruciatingly difficult. So if you're doing it with orchestra, they're almost unplayable. They're very, very difficult. And he used the horn in 2 ways. He used it for pastoral settings like hunting scenes and outdoor scenes, which historically people have always done. But he also used it in military terms, Bach did. So if he's talking about violence and he's talking about war and he often sets that aria or that text with, specifically with horns, but often with trumpets as well. You have a particularly militant Sunday, and this opening movement that uses it throughout, and then he uses it again in the 3rd movement and brings it all back, but just the horns. He doesn't bring the other music back. He just puts the horns, those 2 horns and the timpani, the 2 horns and the timpani over your choral singing. So you have a choice instantly. So do you match the violence of the horns? So you're really shining a light on that feature of the music. So you would be singing very percussively. Or do you sing legato to show the contrast of the 2 textures? And both are, whatever. I mean, the choice is a good choice, as long as you're making one. But in terms of just in the simplest way, that's the first, the kind of the first decision you have to make. There's some thought that he would write music like this intentionally to humiliate the players, which I think is fascinating. It happened a lot with all of the tenor arias, Patricia, all of them, which are virtually unsingable. I know, I've sung most of them, and they're impossible. I mean, they're really impossible. And think about who was singing it. These were pubescent boys. And he put them up in front of the church in Leipzig and said, go to it. And the texts that he chose for those arias are often about shame and humility. And he put up a theatrical event and made this poor kid embarrass himself in front of his town, and in front of his congregation. And there's some thoughts that he did this in his other music as well. There's a modern composer doing this intentionally as well. David Lang does this on purpose. He wants the composers to look uncomfortable. He does not want them to look comfortable. He wants them to look uncomfortable. So he writes music that forces them to look that way. No matter how much you practice, you ain't going to get it. Wow. It's too hard. And that's how the arias are, even for modern day singers, the best singers in the world. They're just ferocious. So and the horn parts in this make me wonder that. They completely make me wonder if there was something about that discomfort that he was trying to elucidate. The recitatives that surround this both mention my memory's working now, but they both mention the strife and the argument that was still alive and well, it sounds like, with the Catholic Church. That the people over the I wish I had it in front of me, but you should look at those recits, because there's the two recits on either side of movement 3 that is really specific about Reformation Sunday, and being particularly Lutheran, if you will.
But why he was behaving like that, or why he has something against the singers? It reminds me of Mozart with the soprano, giving those arias like crazy.
Why did he hate us? I don't know. I think it was theatrical, and that's what the research is saying. It's not my thought. The research is saying it was about theater. He was wanting the singer to appear and feel whatever the emotion of the text was. Fascinating. But you ask about other performance things. I didn't mean to take us off track. I'm good at that. When I teach chorales, and boy, I get to teach a lot of them. That the thing that I say over and over and over again is stick the cadence. And I always use the metaphor of the gymnast. Where you come off the tumbling vault and you have to land on 2 feet and not move. And all of those cadences, that's how I see them. So you have to approach those and they're clearly marked. They're all fermatas, right? So as you approach all of those fermatas, those last 2 and 3 chords, as you come into those fermatas, and then you got to stick the cadence. So you probably are going to remove a little vibrato, or narrow the vibrato a little bit, and really stick the cadence so it's perfectly in tune before you begin the next phrase, and then stick the next cadence. And the other piece that I spend my life saying is sing the punctuation. So if there's a comma in the text or a period in the text, then you have to lift or breathe. That he wrote the music that way. You can't sing through, and it's art, y'all. So there's always exceptions. It's never always true. But 98% of the time, you need to acknowledge that there was a comma there, or an exclamation point there, or a period there, as you're singing, because he wrote the music that way. It's true in the arias. It's true in the choral music. It's throughout. He wrote very, very specifically to the text, which is funny if you've sung a lot of Bach and worked with lots of conductors who are going to say so often that he was an instrumental composer, not a vocal composer. And that makes me crazy. He's the best vocal composer. He's amazing. It's just hard. It's just really, really, really hard. That doesn't mean he's not a good vocal composer. It just means it's hard. So sing the punctuation, which brings out the rhetoric. It brings out the arguments that Bach was trying to make, and elucidates what he was trying to say. If you sing those commas where they're marked, even if you have pairs of words, a pair of words and then a comma, and a pair of words and then a comma, usually sing all of those commas, even with just a little lift or a little inflection. It takes subtlety and care, but that's what it's all about,
Patricia, I think you're muted.
Oh yeah, you're muted, friend.
Kay Campbell, he said, does the German alphabet have the same number of letters as English? For instance,
nope.
No. Okay.
J and I get the same number.
Okay. So
that's a great question. Yeah, it won't work the other way, will it? Yeah, they get the same number. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's one of the questions.
It does have the same. I didn't answer your question, did I? I'm being a good politician. Yeah, they have the same letters, but when you assign the numbers, I and J get the same number.
Okay. Okay. There's another question here. Are there some instances that you could not cut up the fermatas and kind of hold it, but not take a breath?
Yeah. So the fermatas in the chorale literature and in the passions, and not just in Bach's music, but for that whole period of music, they're not indicating hold. They don't mean what it means to us. It means breath, and or it means this is a stopping point, to be really specific. So sometimes you don't breathe after the fermatas, but neither do you stop. You just keep going.
Mm-hmm.
You take a breath, take a lift. It's marking the phrase for you absolutely clearly, but they're not places where you hold the music. Now there are exceptions to that too. I mean, there are places where you're going to want to hold for artistic effect, mm-hmm. and all that. Maybe I should say these were sung by the congregation. So this was congregational singing. Probably the third movement even, because it's so straightforward, except that no, maybe not, because there are those because the orchestra plays alone, doesn't it? So maybe not. But in most of the other chorales, that's really congregational singing. And when you hear the Passions, John Passion or Matthew Passion, all those chorales were sung by the community, by the congregation. So and they would sing it just exactly like you do when we go to church. It's exactly what it is. Okay. Precisely what it is.
They're asking here in regard of challenging the singers, were any of his kids known to be vocalists?
Of Bach's?
Mm-hmm.
Do you mean his children or his students?
His children, his kids. I guess
they were musicians.
Mm-hmm.
Let me think. You know, I've never been asked that question. I don't know if the children were specifically singers or not. They're all trained in singing. Musician training at the time was vocal heavy, mm-hmm. But it was at the very beginning of virtuoso singing at all. That's why the rise of opera happens in this century, is because of the rise of virtuoso singing. But if you're going to be a composer or certainly an organist, you're trained in singing. Even a violinist was trained in singing prior to the Baroque period and coming into the Baroque period. Mm-hmm. But were they singers, like singers? I don't think so. I mean, his choirs were terrible, y'all. Terrible. And he wasn't just talking, he wasn't just complaining. They were terrible. They were not good. And they're singing the hardest music on earth. They're singing the crazy hard music and doing it very, very badly. So what he heard what Bach had to hear when he wrote this music, gosh, I feel bad for him. Maybe that's why he embarrassed his singers, Patricia. He was frustrated with them. Maybe that's why.
So the way that he, performed at that time is totally different, not even polished like we do right now or try to do here, right?
No. So his job in Leipzig, y'all, at the Thomaskirche, he had 2 and even 3 jobs in Leipzig. He was at the Thomaskirche, and I've heard other people compare this to being the music director of the New York Philharmonic or the Cleveland Orchestra or the Philadelphia Orchestra or something like that. I don't love that comparison, but their point is that this is a musical leader of all of Europe. This is the most important musical position and one of the important religious positions in all of Europe, not just Germany. This is a very visible position that he was in. And when he wasn't the first choice he wasn't the second choice for the job, by the way. He was the third choice for this job. But he wanted to create his whole life. He'd been wanting to create what he called in German a well-regulated church music. So he wanted to create great music, the highest caliber of music for every Sunday of the church year and all of the feast days. So when he got the Leipzig job, he wrote a cantata a week, which are multi-movement works, just like you're singing, with orchestra and soloists and recitatives and arias and all of that. He wrote, they were anywhere from 15 or 20 minutes to 45 minutes and an hour long. He wrote 1 a week. He planned to do that for 5 years, and then he got a little angry with the church officials in his 3rd year, which is when this one was written, and kind of tapered off and stopped doing that. This was this is at the beginning of his third year is when he wrote this cantata. But he was writing, I'm sorry, Patricia, I lost the question. Can you remind me what you asked? I'm sorry.
No, the question was that the choirs at the time, they were not way polished like they are right now. That's what
right. So yeah, and that's what I was trying to get to, is that then got lost in my own blabbing. I got lost.
Okay.
So then
It's interesting.
so he would finish, and we know this because we know what his life was like from diaries and other writings of his. He would finish the church services on Sunday, which are all day long thoroughfares, and then he would frantically start writing next week's cantata. He would get it to his copyist by Wednesday, have one rehearsal with his kids and the rest of his people. The orchestra would basically read it before the service, and then they have services on Sunday. Then he'd start the whole thing over again,
like we do here in church.
So it's one of the things that I love most about it. You know, there are people that say, and you don't need to put any stock in these words, but it shows you how the world looks at it. There are scholars that say this is the most creative stretch in all of Western art, in the history of Western art. Yeah. When you line up the books of the cantatas, we have about 200 of them left. 100 have been lost, but we have about 200 left. They're I can't even show them on my screen. The books, it takes up this much space in the library. This is an incredible, crazy amount of music. And it's a crazy amount of music. And it's all incredibly complex. All of it. The first movement of your cantata is a wonder. I mean, it's a wonder. It's incredible music. Yeah. Very, very complex. And all of it unique. None of the cantatas 100% share the same orchestra. None of them. None of those 200 share exactly the same orchestra. And most of them are pretty wild because he was practical.
Right.
You know, it's just like our church choirs and the church choirs that I'm sure many of you are in. Who's going to be here next week? Who's going to be here? And he's talking to the oboists and the violinists and the violists and the bassoonists. It's like, okay, I've got 2 bassoons, but only a bass and a baritone, or bass and a tenor, and so that's what he wrote for. That's what he wrote. So there are some crazy orchestrations in this music, and unbelievably unique. So no, there was no time for polish. And he was constantly complaining about his kids at the Latin school that he taught to sing, and they were the sopranos in the groups, and he was always complaining about how awful they were, how terrible they were. His letters are full of it, complaining to the church officials and complaining that he has to do it at all. And
but
he wasn't the best teacher, we don't think.
Imagine the amount of reading that they have, and the side reading that they had at that time. It is incredible. You know, working in one of these pieces, it takes, a whole semester or even a year, depending on the piece, and they do it in a week.
Yeah, in one day. I mean, they have one rehearsal. And, probably no real sense of pedagogy like so many of you wonderful teachers have of how to really help them learn and help them do it other than just yelling at them.
Wow. Yeah, it's just fascinating. There is a question in here, and I think, yes, were all those musicians male? Yes, they were male musicians.
All males, yep.
Yeah.
And little boys singing the soprano parts. He occasionally had... well, more than occasionally, friends, but he would have female soloists for arias occasionally. And I'm searching my mind. I think we're still unclear if that happened during worship services at Thomaskirche. But I don't quite remember. We don't have all those documents. So.
Yeah, there's still some, the attendance of the church who go to the church, or who, at one point there was no women serving the church. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But
the arias, so many of them are clearly written for women, just because of the range and because of the facility that little boys just simply, no little boy would ever have.
It's a beautiful alto aria here in this one, in the third movement.
Yeah,
Let's find it. Oh,
so good.
go
And y'all, he reused this music. So he reset this cantata, the opening movement and movement 3.
Mm-hmm.
That, sorry, not movement 3, the aria that you're talking about, the second movement, I guess, the alto aria. He reset those in 1730, and then he also used those 2 movements. He used them in one of his mass settings, Lutheran mass settings.
Trying to find
15 years later. It's one of the ways we use to judge what Bach thought of his own music. The music that he chose to reset and the music that he reused in his own life and in his own worship services and all that.
Yeah.
So by all accounts, he thought this was pretty good music too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the second movement. The
second movement, right? Yeah, right after that opening chorus. It's beautiful. It's a great aria.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites. I think that's why I picked it. Oh, I like this piece. Oh, let me see if they have some questions. I'm gonna unmute people, or you can mute on yourself if you have any question for Dr. Garner.
Can I go? I've got several,
Yes,
actually,
Tim.
but I'll limit it.
Go, Tim.
So when you were talking about the fact that he would measure out his compositions before he wrote a note, is there any evidence that he did that because he already knew the composition in his head, or was he only conforming to a structure that he had already decided?
There's nothing. So they've scoured the Robert Marshall has looked at those pages under all kinds of scrutiny to look for any kind of indication for answers to that question. But the music that he's writing requires computation, and he could do it at the organ. But I heard we had an organist here at the festival a couple of years ago and had a similar question. So your question is about, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, is about, was it already written in his head and he was really transcribing the music that he's hearing?
Right.
Or imagining, right?
Yeah.
And the organist that was here can do that, right? He can sit down and improvise a fugue in the style of Bach right there in front of your eyes. It's remarkable. You know him, Patricia, Sean Duggan.
Okay.
Father Sean.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he came to the festival and played. He's a famous keyboardist.
Uh-huh.
I met him in Louisiana, actually. And he said that it's very different. Father Sean said, if I had to sit and write down what I was improvising at the organ, I would fail, because so much of it is digital. So much of it is what he's feeling in his hand. It's like his fingers have brains, right? It's like his fingers are working it out, not his head. So he knows where he's going. They play modulations so much that their fingers just move there. Mine don't, but their fingers just move there. So he said, if you ask me to sit and write a fugue for me, he could do it. I can write you a fugue, but it's not going to be the same as me sitting down. It's going to be much more difficult for me than sitting down at the organ and just playing it. So the best thought is probably that he wasn't writing down something he was improvising in his head. And plus he made lots of mistakes. So he would scratch out and there's lots of corrections. He didn't just write them out perfectly. So the best guess is that he was not doing that. He was actually creating in the moment, creating while he was actually writing.
Wow.
And he didn't write at the keyboard. There was a keyboard in the room with him, but the best guess is he didn't use it. He just did it all with his brain cell, just all with his head. That makes me crazy.
Yeah. Sick.
I vaguely recall from college hearing about some music that he wrote. It was not sacred music, but parlor music, I guess is what I would call it. But like he had some where one singer would stand on one side of a stand and another singer would sing at the opposite side of the stand, and they would both read their music as if it was their music oriented correctly for them.
Yep.
And it worked together.
Yep.
Were there many of those? Was that?
There were 3 or 4 of those. We did a couple of them a few years ago. He has that stuff. There's just 3 or 4 of them. And then he also has they're called crab cannons. So you could start at the end and sing from the end to the middle, or you can start at the beginning and sing from the beginning to the middle. And they're perfect. And they're perfect cannons, which is extraordinary counterpoint. It's the pinnacle of counterpoint. So it's really, really, really good row your boat and around. I mean, that's what a cannon is, except crazy complicated. So you can read this way or that way, and you don't even hear it. You don't even, as a listener, you would have to point it out to me that that's a crab cannon. You don't even hear it. It still has this beautiful climax at the right place, and it's phenomenal. It's ridiculous. Yeah, his music's full of that stuff. It's full of those gosh, meaningless games. Esoteric, right? It's esoteric. And that's why the golden mean makes a certain amount of sense. And in numerology, it's not that far of a stretch when he's doing this kind of stuff to his friends, just to torture his friends. You know?
Do you really think it was game, so to speak, or was he specifically trying to conform to a structure and it ended up being, in other words, he's trying to frame it correctly so that
well, I think 2 things. He's interested in contrapuntal puzzles. We know that for sure. So he liked the problem of setting himself up with difficult problems to solve. It's like solving a math problem, very similar to solving a math problem in some ways. He liked setting up problems for himself like that and liked solving them. So there's one thing, but he also, I don't know, he was also very playful. He was a playful guy, and the diversity of his music shows that, and the way he approaches certain texts shows that. That he was virtually, even though he was writing very, very fast, almost a lot, he was always writing very, very fast, that he always really cared. He always really wanted to do something that was pretty cool, not just pushing it out as fast as he can. He really wanted to make something special, it seems like. But gosh, we don't know. We really don't know. His life is complicated, and he was a complicated personality, at least as we look at it historically. So it's difficult to parse all of that. I love those questions.
Any other question? Our composers, Betty, our organist.
There you go. He or she should be talking. You know all that stuff.
You're muted, Betty.
It's crazy.
You're muted, Betty. Huh. Okay, she's still muted.
Okay.
There, now,
There you are.
There you go.
I think you had the control. First of all, for all the teachers, one blessing of this COVID has been Patricia's annotated scores, because we can study them and it saves a lot of rehearsal time. But I had a question from the point of view of primarily an instrumentalist. What changes in performance practice for vocalists have you seen? You're much younger than me, but I've seen a lot of them in the keyboard.
Yeah.
So what, for vocalists, what have you seen?
Well, you know, we went through the 1990s when we saw major orchestras, the large orchestras, New York Phil, etc., removing all of the all Baroque music from their programs. And really only thinking that specialized groups that specialize in Baroque music or early music should be singing or playing this. We're past that now, and I'm thankful for that. But that led to a level of specialization, and led to, you know, the early music programs cropping up in universities and graduate programs. And now I really, is your name Betty? Is that right, Betty?
Yes. Yes.
Betty, I really feel like it's almost an expectation of singer training that you're going to learn to sing Baroque music. And there's some voices that just are not going to be able to do it very well. You know, great big horns, great big voices are going to always struggle, at least females are really going to struggle with that. But, you know, I'm watching the major conservatory, because you can't, it's so silly to expect to make a life as an opera singer. It's so rare and so impossible. And the major music programs are understanding that, and understanding that you have to learn to sing stylistically. So I think the singing has changed dramatically, even in my 27 years of doing this, where we used to hear just whoever was singing on the opera stage also singing Bach, and we're hearing that a lot less. When I came to the festival here, which is why I came to BW, they were the soloists that they were hiring, my dear, amazing, wonderful colleague was hiring, was that he was hiring the major opera stars that are right off that stage. But that this wasn't really, they would never say this is really their repertoire. And now that's not true so much. Certainly I hire Baroque specialists mostly to sing this music, with some exceptions. And I noticed that, like I said, the singer training, they're really being taught to do it more than they did when I was a student. Probably even when you were a student, Patricia. You know, it didn't exist. Mm-hmm. I think some of that's knowledge, and I think some of that's the industry. Choral singing is booming. It's exploding. While some other arts are struggling, we're flourishing. So yeah, I think it's a big change, Betty.
Thank you.
Talking about vocal style, the voice, obviously you say that the big voices and all that, but for Baroque, what kind of color, what kind of timbre you use in order to perform these pieces? More straight tone, more light? What kind of?
Yeah, it's a good question, Patricia. And of course it depends on the repertoire, but you're usually going to need a lighter mechanism. If you think about a 3.5 hour Matthew Passion or a Good Grief Mass in B minor or something, if you're carrying a lot of muscle in your mechanism, you'll never get through it. I mean, you'd have to have cords of steel. You'll never get through it. So you're going to need to use a slightly lighter mechanism all the time. And lots of the music requires you to sing in tune. I mean, there's a lot of it that really demands that it be in tune, or it really won't sound good. One of the other things that I love in this world is Messiah. I love Messiah. And it can take a beating. You know, you can kind of get through Messiah and not do it great, and it's still just awesome. Because I don't think music needs to be perfect. I'm just not that guy. And it can still be great. But man, Bach, lots of Bach is not that way. It's pretty fragile. It's a house of cards all the time. So a lot of that music requires that you sing in tune, which often, not always, but often means reducing or narrowing vibrato. Mm-hmm. And I have lots of students for whom that's hard. Sopranos have a hard time with a lot of, my sopranos often do. So we can revoice them, mm-hmm. Or help them find technique that uses a lighter mechanism to help them get through all that.
A lot of breath support as well.
Yeah, it's big singing. It's not small singing. It's big singing. It has lots of air and lots of pressure, lots of strength, but it has to have this all has to be light and free and easy. Mm-hmm. The energy has to come from lower than that. Probably skinny vowels, Patricia, helps a lot.
Yeah.
So, you know, we spend so much time opening and all of that, when a really small aperture in the front will really help a lot with that.
So fascinating. We can go on and on and on.
Oh,
One of my favorite topics.
me too.
Oh, yes, yes. Any other question for Dr. Garner? All right.
I wish I could hear y'all sing
I know.
so bad. I wish I wasn't just talking at you. How
Well,
boring. I'd much rather be making music.
Well, we definitely be looking forward to see you probably next year. It has been such a great honor to have you here with us. I know you're very busy, and I just wanted to see you too.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Well, thank you. The pleasure is all mine.
Thank you so much for being with us, Dr. Garner, and we just delighted to have you here with us and share with you all your knowledge about Bach, which is one of the composers that we're always trying to do some good, trying to perform good. So this has been great. So thank you so much.
Thank you all. Pleasure.
Okay.
Peace, friends.
Bye.